Alina, tell me about the first insight you had about the market before building Chili Piper.
We knew that we wanted to get into sales and marketing. We didn't know exactly how we're going to start entering this market, and we knew that it was quite fragmented and crowded space. But we had the first client pay upfront to solving a very specific problem that they had. And before we accepted that as a project, we just asked around if others had the same problem to make sure that it was something that people would pay for, which was as soon as you have a prospect on the phone and you want to move them further in the process, because it's very time sensitive and they say, yes, I want to talk to and get a demo, or I want to onboard, or whatever that next step was, they had to be handoff. So there has to be a handoff to happen within the revenue teams. And it had to be an equitable handoff that had quite a lot of complex rules in place. And you wanted to make that transfer and handoff as smooth as possible, so that you say, yeah, you can talk tomorrow at 3:30 with Joe. Let me book to you and let me make sure that you get the invite, instead of you having to fiddle over some spreadsheets and do some mathematical formula to figure out if Joe really should get that next meeting on the books, or he has too many opportunities, or he has too few, or he's in the right region, or he's not in the right industry, etc. So our tool at the beginning did that. When a rep would get somebody interested on the phone to get a demo, we would hand them off to the right team member on the spot. So it was like what we called at that time a hot handoff. And it could also happen so that you could hand them off on the spot, so that they can speak immediately to somebody if they would be interested on the spot.
So the handoff or the transition from an SDR to account executive took too long because of complicated rules and other issues, and you guys solved this one specific problem.
Exactly. And before we put our brains into solving that specific problem, we made sure to ask around if many people had that same exact problem. And we turned out that a lot of teams, there was a lot of tension, especially between SDRs and AEs, that the handoff was not equitable, that some SDRs would favorite some certain account executives because of better closure rates, and then they would have a commission based on closure, or just because they were friends and they would want that person to get more bookings. So there was always this conflict between the manager of account executives and the manager of SDRs that would say, okay, this process is not working, much better to put some automation in place rather than leave it up to chance. And by solving it to software, you'd not only solve some human tensions, but at the same time, the process would get smoother, because the prospect would not have to wait on the phone or an email or whatever the place was to wait to get the next interaction with the company. So it was solving two problems in one.
So the sales tech landscape is insanely competitive. So many tools. And classical VC critique could be, this is a feature, not a product. Yet you went on to build it. How soon before you were sure that we're onto something? This is going to work.
It was very tricky, because that's exactly what every VC would tell us: you're not interesting, or just a feature. And even ourselves, we were not 100% bought that we can actually take the next step from that and make sure that we have something that could be considered a few $billion company. But as soon as we understood the jobs to be had for each one of these roles, we understood that there was much more to it. There were many more entry points where an inbound lead comes in that needs immediate help, that helps automate that conversion and then accelerate it. And then all of a sudden it hit us, shit, this is huge, because we are doubling conversion rates. And so you spend the same money as a marketer, but you get double the pipeline without doing anything extra, just paying Chili Piper a few extra dollars there a month. It was like the light bulb switch. And then all sorts of, as that realization came to fruition, many other use cases around that inbound conversion came through to us, and then we sold for them one by one until our product became very, very sticky. And yeah, we have an amazing retention for our customers, because as soon as they put chili pepper, they don't want to take it out.
Because it just works. It actually increases the demo sales conversion rates.
It doubles their conversion rates for inbound. So you can imagine everybody's super happy about their inbound conversion rate. We say, oh, we close at 40%, we close at 30% compared to outbound, which is whatever, 16%, 15%, 11%, whatever they have. So they compare it with that. So it's double. It's amazing that they have this inbound conversion at 30, 40%. But then they put chili pepper on, and then they have 70% or 80%. And that's mind blowing. I know it's so mind blowing that everybody has a hard time believing that it can happen, and then they put JavaScript on their site. It happens, and then they're believers.
Was the success immediate? Like, did it work right away?
I wish. I wish. They even though the value proposition was obvious to everybody, and even though it's a no-brainer, like I just mentioned, everybody had a hard time believing it because it seemed so good to be true, too good to be true. So they would be reluctant. Oh, I have to change my Marketo rules, or I have to change my Pardot rules, or I have to change my HubSpot rules, and you're going to come in. I have to have this 6 months process where everything is changed. I don't want to go through it, and by the end of it, maybe it won't even happen, that conversion. So we said, you know what, you can try it on just this funnel on your website, just this form that comes through, and then you can book it with chili pepper and see what's going on. And you don't have to make a big commitment. You can just make it with your small SDR team or something different. And people will say, okay, fine, this seems like a smaller change. They would try it on just one part of the website, and then immediately the light bulb would come on, and they would put it everywhere.
So you sold a small scale, safe experiment. Let's try an experiment. It doesn't take a huge commitment on your end, and that was also the aha moments. Like, oh, this shit works. Let's roll it out everywhere.
Yeah. So that was the segment of the market, and it was like one step by a time. Let's do an experiment. Of course, we had some more advanced buyers out there, people who would hack their way through making things work with Calendly. So they would try to do a Zapier plus a Calendly plus this hack to catch all and etc. So those that were trying to hack things with Calendly, they were much faster to buy, but you have different buyers at different stages of their journey of optimization and in their conversion journey.
How did you get your first set of customers?
The first ones were just in person. So we would go to events where we knew that potential buyers would hang, and we would say, hey, do you have this problem? Yes, we do. Do you want to solve it? Sure, let's try. So at the beginning, it was a lot of sure, let's try. Just by seeing myself and Nicola everywhere they would go, they would think maybe these people are onto something. But because from the very beginning, we got people that were quite influential in their industry, and people who were quite advanced in their tech stack and in the things that they would experiment. So the early adopters, it was easier to say, oh, you know that Greenhouse did it, or you know that Square did it, and that would make things more comfortable for them to try it out, because these are all big brands.
Were these first set of customers, the influential customers, were they also like generating a lot of word of mouth? Did you do anything intentional to get the virality, so to speak?
I think that it's something that marketers understand, but don't understand at the same time, which is that there is a dark funnel that's happening. People talking a lot behind your paywalls and behind your ads and behind everything that you might do that's visible. And that's what happened to us in the early days. There was a strong dark funnel that was happening.
Going back to that initial VC critique, this is a feature, not a product. Mm-hmm. So essentially, once you started getting some success, were you afraid that like the big players, maybe Salesforce or whoever, is going to, build what you built. So what was your moat, or how did you think about ensuring long term competitive advantage?
It's a question that I would get a lot, even from journalists and from VCs. Hey, isn't X going to copy you? Because it's so easy to copy, because it's such a no-brainer product. And I would say Google can copy everybody, Salesforce can copy everybody. There's no doubt that they can, because they have the cash in the bank and the resources to implement on it. But you have to understand that in each one of these activities or product builds, you have to have a driving force behind it, somebody who really wants to make it happen and has the skills to actually bring it to fruition and execution. And you have to understand so many facets of that particular problem that's so personalized to that particular persona, that the likelihood of that happening is very low. I mean, Google had so many failed projects, and I'm sure Salesforce has had so many failed projects because of that. You rarely find the combination of the right person who wants to drive it with the right skills and targeting the right persona with the right problem, and so forth. So it is probable, but it's of a small, very, very small likelihood.
So just building the feature is not enough. You also need somebody to evangelize and market and tell the story.
And then constantly tweak things to make sure that it actually captures the attention of that buyer, not only at the beginning of the sales process, but post sales process, to make sure that the product is sticky. Like, there's so many moving parts in a product that you really have to have somebody with like a strong strong energy behind the project. Yeah.
How has the strategy changed between the time when you actually got started in 2016 and now 5 years later? How has it evolved? What kind of changes have happened?
At the beginning, because we were so focused on being cash positive, because we didn't have any funding, everything was made very intentional. We had this discipline of being very careful on how any cash is spent, how any hire is made, um, how we would do improvements in the product and so forth, to make sure that we're positive from a cash perspective, that we economically viable no matter what. And now that this round of funding came upon us, obviously we have more freedom to being a little bit more bold in our actions and taking some additional risks that we would have not had before, which can be really, really good, because then you can take some bigger bets. Obviously, you have to still be mindful of how money is spent. You can't spend it all on parties in Tulum like we're gonna do next weekend. But I'm diverging, and it's not true. But we do meet once a year, all our employees. So it gave us that courage, and at the same time, it allows us to have a faster penetration, right? So we can get more clients faster.
So now that you raised money, you have more resources. So what exactly is going to change? Okay, you can spend more money on ads and hire more salespeople. What else is changing?
So that's happening. Then our marketing strategies are changing course as well. We're going to do many more things that we weren't able to do before. And even on the product, because I'm the product side of the funding company. So there's Nicola, who's in charge of all the operations and sales and marketing. And there's Alina, me, who's responsible for the product and the engineering. On the product side, it pains me that I cannot have that individual conversation with the buyer and that individual conversation with the people using our platform, because that's where the insights would come. Now I have to collect those insights at scale. So I have to be in thousands of conversations that are happening in a way that makes sense, so I can keep that strategy at the same pace as I did when I was just myself listening to each one of these calls. And it's very interesting, because it's not easy to come up with with a good method to create those insights to come from all the pipers that we have at Chili Piper, and make it turn it into a bigger scale feedback gathering. But that's kind of like where I am right now on figuring out how to put those systems in place.
Do you have an example of how you collected insights? You know, your light bulb went on, decided to build something, and it also worked.
Currently at scale.
Yeah.
So we have all sorts of alerts that we put on all the recordings that we have for when certain key words are being mentioned on calls, so that I can go in and then pinpoint, okay, they asked in that way, but why did they ask in that way? Did something change in the market? An example would be our events product. We had a product that would help people book meetings at events in person, and then COVID hit, so we had to put that product under Moat Building. So we had a trigger on people asking us about events, and as soon as we started hearing that on calls, we brought back the product from from the shelf, and now we're dusting it off and say, okay, let's make sure that this product works for this environment. But it was because of these triggers on calls that we understood that the market was thinking back about events, and they're getting back to meeting rooms and getting people in person, getting back together again.
Over the last 5 years, what were some of the bets that didn't pay off? Maybe some product bets or marketing strategy wise, anything that just didn't pan out?
Well, that's an example, I guess. The events product being launched a few months just before the pandemic hit. We spent a lot of time into making that work, maybe about a year. And then we had it live for a few months, and then boom, everything shut down. And all these people that were planning events before, they were trying to scramble and figure their new lives and new strategies. That was tough. That was tough because we had a big pipeline and big revenue projections from it.
As you're thinking about the future, you know, the competition is probably going to get more stiff down the line. What are you doing now about building moats, and how are you guys thinking about moats in general?
So it's interesting because for the longest time we had zero competition, and it was quite unusual that we would be operating like that. There's no company that doesn't have competition, and it's both a luxury and not, because you still have to educate the market quite a lot when you have competitors that are starting to copy what you do, which is what's happening to us right now. There's a benefit to that because they're going and they're saying, oh, you should do that. And it's not only Chili Piper who tells you that you should optimize your conversion. There's also X, Y, and Z that tell you that. Then you're more likely to take action. So there's the buyer is more aware of the problem. They're more aware that there's a solution as opposed to the status quo. So for us, it's actually good in that sense. We're getting the competition to educate our buyer. It makes us more competitive ourselves, because then we say, oh, they've done this feature, we should have done it 10 times better. So it brings the competitive spirit, and I really like that. And as for how to build the moat, I don't think that there's a specific formula that companies can rely on to do that. These days, it's quite easy to turn on and off a technology. It's quite easy to try and experiment new tools, and there's no real way of taking people and saying stay with us unless you're Salesforce and all your data is with you. I don't think Salesforce is going to go anywhere. But all these other tools, it's easy to turn on and turn off. But I think that the way Chili Piper is going to stay for sure is by making sure that we cover all the edge cases and all the specific routing rules that other competitors will have a long time to catch up, because we have spent 5 years on super hard, complicated enterprise hardcore use cases that it's going to be very, very hard for them to catch up. And by the time they catch up, we're going to be even more advanced on all sorts of use cases that we're going to cover.
So the strategic bet for the future is like all kinds of deep integrations with enterprise software, and the features that that segment specifically needs, because that's your key buyer.
Exactly. And we're going to start covering many other point solutions that they may be using around routing or any kind of distribution of any kind. But they're going to be able to do it with Chili Piper, and then there's no need for them to switch as long as Chili Piper works well and covers what they need.
You guys started at like $25 a month a seat. It was very cheap. How has your pricing strategy evolved over time?
I think that having something that costs at an affordable price pays good dividends and not at the same time. So the same on one side, you get people to say, okay, it's cheap enough that I'm going to try it. But people would, and when we had the reason why we had to start so low is because people had this reference of Calendly, because people perceived us as being a Calendly alternative, because scheduling on our, that's part of our distribution. And Calendly has a free license. They have a $15 license. I don't remember exactly what the exact pricing is, but they would come from a low pricing point, and we were almost double, so we had to start low. But ROI wise, when you double your pipeline, where your pipeline becomes from 4 million to 8 million, so all of a sudden you add $4 million to your pipeline and you pay $30, it's something not quite right. So you don't really believe that you can pay so little to get such a big conversion. So I think it also hurts us that we pay so low. And there's so much at stake on that solution. So for sure, it comes with good and the bad, that kind of pricing strategy. We have moved a little bit from that because we now have a platform fee, and there are different modules that you can turn on and off. So it's a little bit different than how it started. But there's one thing that's kept with us, and something that's very few companies do. Actually, I don't know of maybe one mother that have transparent pricing. So whatever pricing we have on our website, everybody pays. There's no exception. There's the big guy who with 1,000 licenses pays the same exact price as the guy who has only 3 licenses. And there's no exception to that. There's no negotiation. There's no behind the scenes pricing. There's no discount. There's nothing. That's what you pay. And our account executives are a little bit mad at us because at the end of the month, they have no leverage to close that deal. And a lot of buyers still wait for that end of the month discount. But at the same time, it makes their life easier because they know they can't do 25%, 30%, depending on how the wind blows, right? And you never quite know which which discount of the day you're getting. So there's none of that.
You mentioned that you've been doing quite a bit of customer education, and you're happy that more competitors entered the space because then other people are also doing customer education. Tell me exactly how are you doing this customer education? Like what goes into it?
A lot. Like you experienced, there's a lot that you have to do in many different areas. There's the podcast, there are case studies, there are customer interviews. There's a lot of conversation that needs to happen to expose people what their competitors are doing and how they're doing it and why they shouldn't be left behind in these trends. But every industry is a little bit different. Everybody is approaching it a little bit different. So, for instance, our customers who approach small businesses are going to operate very differently than those who are not, because in the case of a small business, everything has to happen over the phone. There's no, you cannot send the calendar invite to a small business owner. They're not going to look at their calendar. So it has to happen on the phone, and it has to happen really fast. So that contact needs to be via phone. So the appointment has to be done immediately, not through a meeting. So there are all sorts of subtleties, and each persona is going to perceive that subtlety a little bit different by industry as well. So we have to produce a lot of content in each one of these entry points.
When you guys raised your Series B, it was impressive to a lot of people. Like the multiplier on your ARR was high, and this was because of your very high net revenue retention. tell me, how have you achieved? I think you said it's 159%. Uh, how'd you get there?
As I told you, it's for us it's harder to get in the account because people are used to status quo, not doing anything. But once they put chili piper on, they don't want to take it out because it hurts badly their revenue. As soon as one meeting doesn't happen because there's some sort of JavaScript error anywhere or somewhere, they notice and they I don't they don't realize how life was before chili piper when that lead was in the books. So it becomes a very sensitive topic, and it becomes one that you don't want to mess up with anymore. Um, so you don't want to take it out, and then if your pipeline grows and you hire more salespeople, and it snowballs with chili piper, right? So we bring more revenues to the revenue teams, which in case they hire more revenue people, in case which means that they pay us more. So
So there's a beautiful flywheel there. What's a typical, or what's a good team size that brings you on? Like, and what's too little?
uh, uh, there's no too little, but it depends a lot on the volume of leads that people are getting on their website. So they have very little traffic on their website and very few people filling out any form. Then of course you want to talk to if you get one lead every 2 days, it doesn't make any sense to you call them right away. You're on top of them. You make sure that they're served with a VIP carpet. But as soon as you have a certain amount of leads coming through your website, then we make our life much, much easier. But it becomes painful around 10 salespeople. That's when it becomes really painful and you really want to fix the problem. That's when the real pain comes through, because you have people that are coming that are of an existing owner, and maybe some accounts are being worked in tandem by an account executive and an SDR, and in certain circumstances you want them to be handled by an SDR. Maybe you want to be them handled right away. So it depends on the circumstance.
What are you guys doing in terms of your brand and marketing machine, to build moats and also secure your future?
Nicola and I, we invest a lot in our own happiness, if in our own joy. And it's not me and Nicola personal, but our chili piper joy. We want to make sure that when we hire somebody, for instance, we hire people that are really happy with the work that they're doing. They're not just doing it to get a paycheck. It's their passion in whatever role. And if that job description doesn't match them, we invent jobs for them so that they do things with joy. And as soon as we notice that there's something off, when people are starting to perform like this is a job, we act, because we have some certain framework in mind so that this doesn't happen. And it reverberates. If people are happy with their work, then they propagate that further and makes for happier work relationships. We spend so much time on Zoom. We spend so much time at work. Life is short. You shouldn't spend it on boring things. You shouldn't spend it on things that don't interest you. It doesn't make any sense. So I think it starts with that.
And thinking 5 to 10 years into the future, like, what are the bets you are making to be competitive also 10 years from now?
We're going to keep that attitude towards joy, and it's going to be, at least from our perspective, it's going to be much more impactful to have a company that's performing at their peak than anything else, than just hiring for the sake of hiring and expanding for the sake of expanding just to reach the numbers. I mean, of course, we're going to work, and we're going to bring Chili Piper on ready to be IPO'd. I don't know if it's going to happen 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, somewhere around there. But in the meantime, we want to make sure that we have an impact on our employees. And we also have, I don't know if I've told you yet, we have put some money aside for a foundation that has a clear mission of helping people break through diversity and ending violence at work or otherwise. So there's some benefit to knowing that you're working with a company that's so culturally diverse as ours, and that they're aiming to resolve those cultural divergences outside of work as well. We're in many countries and many cities. I think we're in 90 cities by now, and I think we're 30 countries. So it's a quite diverse set of people.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Alina.